Let me tell you about the Higher Self Expo July 2021. It's a 24-hour event with 33 guest speakers who are sharing their wisdom and exploring the connection between science and spirituality. Today's guest is a guest speaker at this event. To register your place and find out more, go to www.higherselfexpo.com. Hey everyone, it's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I'm delighted to welcome you to a Feel Good conversation today. Now, I've got a guest I'm super excited about because he's somebody that's new to me, and somebody who has a whole range of experiences that is very different to what I've come to know. So I'm really fascinated to get inside his mind today. He is an author, a neuroscientist, the inventor of the Precognition Method, and also a pop star. So as you can imagine, I'm a little bit kind of keen to delve into his mindset. So let me tell you a little bit about the work he does. And I'm going to just get my notes up just to make sure I do it right. So he is on a mission to bring cutting edge neuroscience technology to real world professional and personal environments. And he's got practical techniques that are going to help us do that. Now, he uses the latest heart rate variability research to overcome what's known as cognitive lag. So if you're somebody who has suffered from burnout, fatigue, anxiety, overwhelm, and a whole range of symptoms that maybe make you feel a little less than, then this is somebody you really want to listen into because his technique could be of great use, especially if you apply it in your everyday life. His Precognition Method has been successfully applied to award-winning leadership programs, and his nervous system training has also won the TEDx Sydney pitch. So this is a really strong contender for creating change in the world. He's also the best-selling author of The Hidden World, The Inside Story of the Soul. Have I whet your appetite enough yet? I'm hoping so. So anyway, my guest today is called Dr. Kaushik Ram. I'd like to welcome him to the show. Let's bring him on now, shall we? So, Kaushik, welcome to the Feel Good Conversation Show. I'm really curious, first of all, to ask you about your training as a neuroscientist. So can you explain what drew you to neuroscience as a subject and how this has shaped you?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on this show, Louisa. And the whole journey with neuroscience started, I guess, in my teenage years. And I was looking for answers which, seldom came from the teachers, the grown-ups I was around. And a lot of the answers that they gave me about, what reality is or where do my thoughts come from just didn't seem to hit the mark. And I kept asking, which annoyed the grown-ups. So that's kind of where it started. And I guess my entry point into understanding the world was through biology. I studied biology, animal behavior, and things like that initially, just to work out the natural world. And then when I was in my teenage years, like 18 and 19, that's when a book came across my hands, which was by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And once I read that, everything that I knew about science kind of collapsed. And so I had to rediscover reality again. And so in order to go around discovering that, I decided to take a hard approach, which was study neuroscience itself, work out where our thoughts come from. And that's been a 15-year journey. So after leaving high school, I went and did another 13 years as a neuroscience researcher. So that's been sort of in the professional career. And yeah, alongside, I was always investigating, the mind, the body in various different elements. So it's been a very long journey just getting to this point.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's a huge question to be asking yourself, like, where do thoughts come from? Wow.
Yeah.
It's great, isn't it, how a book inspires your next journey. So, wow. When we had our first call, I expected it to be all about the brain. And in fact, it turns out to be a lot about the heart. You spoke with great authority about the purpose of the heart. And you made a distinction between, and I'm going to get this right, I've got it written down. You made a distinction between what the mind wants and what the heart can create. Can you share a little bit about that for me, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the distinction really comes from the fact that the mind is populated by all these thoughts. To this day, I don't know where they come from, so we'll just get that clear. But when we look at the heart, a lot of our physiology changes before it reaches our mind. And so things like, sweating response on your hands, dilation of your pupils, there's a lot of different physiological things that happen in your body, even before our senses or what we are picking up from our senses reaches our subconscious perception. And then the subconscious decides what's important, what's negligible, and then it filters into our conscious perception. And all that time, it takes about 200 milliseconds before something happens and it reaches our conscious perception. So in that time, so many physiological changes have happened. And so when I talk about the heart being the first perception of reality, it is the moment anything happens around us, immediately our heart rate changes, and that governs all the physiological processes. So the distinction really comes from, by the time information enters our heads, we are seeing it through the lens of all our past experiences or what we want in the future. It's very easy for that information to be biased or manipulative. While when the heart perceives something, it simply is. And it hasn't, added any of the other filters across it. So it's a very pure way of perception. So that's why I say there's a difference between what the mind wants and what the heart can create. And I use the word create very purposefully there as well. So while the mind is always coming from a place of lack, it thinks it wants, good things. And this is the classic saying where, the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Isn't it just?
So we always think we're doing the right thing, but how often does the mind, keep bringing us in knots, or, we try to do something and then try to correct it, or, there's all these, deceptions that the mind creates, and then we end up putting out the fires later on. So that's basically what the distinction is.
Yes, I love what you're talking about with filters there. My husband calls it, like, he says that we have a certain listening for something, so we'll be going through life and something will happen, and our own listening for how something is going to play out is the thing that our mind will hold on to. We'll shape it into that kind of, we'll put it into that box. That almost answers my next question, actually, because I heard you say before that the heart is the first perception of reality. And so I guess with this, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Is that taking us even sooner in the journey? So we're going back to the heart. How is the heart the first perception of reality exactly?
Yeah, so I've mentioned this before as, the physiological changes that happen. So the pathway really originates at the heart. Certain metabolic changes happen. Your adrenals may fire up. Your thyroid gland may be stimulated, and that puts the nervous system into a different state. And then the body starts allocating different resources depending on the situation. So if the heart rate accelerates, for example, then the body registers a threat response. The threat might not be real, but the body knows no different. So it creates an artificial response or a real response to something that is artificial. And from there, the energy may be withdrawn from, your digestive processes and allocated to adrenal function. And so your physiology has changed. And then in the subconscious processing, this information is reinterpreted as well. So now the subconscious is looking at the environment from a perspective of threat. And so that's where, negativity might come in, or, judgments, blame, anything that we have adopted from our previous experiences. And
Yes.
so now that has taken precedence. And then when we start thinking about things, it is through one of these experience or one of these lenses that we observe a situation. So already our perception is manipulated from that, like from very early on. And we might be thinking that, this is what I think, but there's already so many processes that has occurred that has decided what you may choose to think.
Yeah, I'm marveling over the irony that you must have gone through in wanting to know the answers to things and studying neuroscience, and then early on realizing that actually we can never know the truth about anything. Because how do you actually get to that pure truth without all of your filters and your reasoning and everything that you add in on top of your sort of intimate knowing about a situation? Wow, that's quite a thing to have to get over. So you've written a book, and as author of The Hidden World, The Inside Story of the Soul. Can you tell me a little bit? Can you hear the birds in the background?
Very likely. Yeah.
We've just started. I should say, we're recording this across the world, so we're in completely different time zones. It's actually 6 o'clock here in the morning, and the morning bird song has just started. It's so beautiful. I'm wondering if it will pick up on the video. So back to your story. Sorry, The Hidden World, The Inside Story of the Soul. What was it that first inspired you to write that, and how? What is your hope for this book? In reaching the public?
So I knew I was going to write this book after I had read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Uh-huh.
So
yeah,
and this was still when I was in my 20s, and early 20s. I was probably like 21, 22, and at that time I knew I was going to write a book, but I didn't know when. And I didn't know what was going to be in that book. So that idea had been born, but I didn't really know or have the maturity yet to write. And over time, I kept researching, kept investigating, and the subtleties of sharing information started to come through. I realized that you can't simply tell people information; it just doesn't land. Because people only take on board what they want. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. So I knew that if I was to create a how-to book, it would just be another how-to book. And so in my investigations, I knew the science which was informing a lot of my work, but what I liked reading was more fiction. And one of my favorite authors was Paulo Coelho. And so I read all of his books. And a side note, The Alchemist is not in my top 5 of the favorite books from Paulo Coelho. So just get that out of the way as well. But I found the way he delivered information, the way he created stories, which had so many levels of meaning within it, I found that really profound. And so that, I guess, inspired my own way to write, which is also very poetic. And so now I had the writing style that I wanted. The information I thought I would write never entered the book. And basically, I was in Byron Bay which is outside Sydney in Australia.
Mhm.
And I was there with a group of friends. We were 40 of us, and we were
Wow, big
basically
group.
setting our intentions for the coming year, which was 2016. And I've always been fairly clear, fairly precise with my intentions, and very deliberate. So I smashed out my intentions. So like I'm gonna do this, this, and this, and then I basically after that I guess big group intention setting exercise.
Mhm.
I remember walking away from it, and the next day I was sitting next to a waterfall, and all my hopes, dreams, and intentions that I had set had completely evaporated, and I was like in the space of nothing. I was like, I don't know what to do,
Wow.
and at that point, because I've had all this pre-existing experience in meditation and being with an internal state of nothingness or even loneliness, I wasn't threatened by it. I was actually quite familiar and comfortable with it. And so I didn't try
Mhm.
to fill up that space with more things to do. Instead, I just stayed with it. And I stayed with it for a month. And that's when the first insights of the book started to come through. And so I knew this was something important, and I started writing it down. And after about 3 chapters, I looked at it and I was like, this is horrible. Like, there's no mood setting, there's no character development, there's
Yeah.
no story arc. And at that point, I realized that I can't simply just half do a book. It
Yeah.
requires a dedicated time and space. And so I literally abandoned my life in Sydney and I went to Thailand. And yeah, that's where I wrote my book. Majority of it I wrote while living inside a cave. And that story itself has been featured in a number of documentaries. And, as a standalone story behind the book, it's quite interesting in itself. But through that experience, I was able to write from a place that was quite pure. I was living in nature in my own purest state. So I wasn't getting bombarded by any external information. I wasn't doing any research. Instead, I had this creative freedom to take the book anywhere I wanted. And so that's really how I wrote the book.
Wow. I'm imagining that when you were inside the cave for that length of time without being bombarded by modern day life, that some of your filters may have dropped or changed. Your perception must have been completely altered. I know you said you're already in an altered state anyway. What other changes did you notice about yourself during that period whilst you're in a cave?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because a lot of my behavior started to change.
Yeah.
For example, when I came into the cave, I did come in with a city mindset. I still wanted to work out. I had,
How are you working out? Were you doing resistance training with yourself against a cave wall?
I brought with me some gymnastic rings, and
Yeah.
I used to, and I still do use the gymnastic rings. And I tried to set it up in that cave, but the cave resisted. It almost had a mind of its own. And so
Yeah.
whatever I was bringing into it, if it didn't match the, I don't know what to call it, the vibration of the cave, it expelled it. And so the cave is quite legendary. It's had, people stay in there before, and some of them have had, dengue fever, or termites ate their clothes, or some mishap happened, which, they weren't aligned with the energy of the cave. and I came with a misalignment as well. And very quickly I realized if I was to stay in this area, I would have to match the energy where I was staying. And so I threw out the rings after a week of trying, and like it wasn't like, didn't matter how elaborate I tried to set it up, it always broke down. So I let it go. I basically surrendered to the nature around me, and the rhythms that I was normally familiar with started to change. So, for example, I'd find myself waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning. And at that time, I had all these ideas flooding my mind almost barbarically. And that's when I started writing my book. And then I would fall asleep again and then wake up with sunrise. And then I'd have all these pages written, which I'd then transcribe onto my computer during the day. And I was like, where does all this come from? But it was as if I wrote my book almost in a dream state. And also, my sleeping pattern had changed. I used to light fire in the cave. And so there were times when like the logs in the fire would run out. And so my sleep would sort of go into light sleep at the same time. And I'd find myself waking up, putting another log in the fire and going back to sleep. So all of these subtle changes were, happening in my natural rhythm. And so the pace at which we move in daily life did not match that pace in nature. So it's kind of harmonizing with the rhythm of nature.
I love that. I love that so much. I wonder how many humans actually give themselves the opportunity of harmonizing with their environments and being conscious that they're doing that. Wow, that is very profound. Yeah, I like that a lot. So I want to take you from your story now. It's almost like we're going to change the state altogether. I want to take you from the story because I watched your music video that you did with Coco the Conscious called The Equation of Love. And I really liked it. Not normally my genre, but I have to say it had a really good beat. So you're a performer too. How did that come about? And what led you there?
Yes, I a performer. It just came out quite magically. I happened to have done a talk at a music festival 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And there were at least 100, maybe even 150 people in the audience. I don't really remember most of them, but after the talk, Coco, who's the hip hop artist, he was probably 21 or 22 back then.
Wow.
He was moved by my talk, so he came up and introduced himself, and we had a nice conversation, but I didn't think much of it, and we didn't actually exchange any contact details. It was a music festival. We don't really carry our phones around. There's no reception. So yeah, we just left it at that. We just left it as a beautiful conversation. And so after that interaction, that sort of was forgotten. And 2 years later, December 2020, I was just walking casually down Bondi Beach. And suddenly this kid sort of jumps in my way and starts yelling Lost Paradise, which was the music festival, and I didn't know who he was. And then he started helping me to connect the dots. He was like, oh, you gave this talk, and I came up and said hi to you. And then it just clicked. I was like, oh, wow, like you were the kid who had approached me. And so we, again, had a very beautiful conversation. And afterwards, we exchanged details this time. So I did find him on Instagram, and he did the same. And so we were in contact, and I was also at that time sort of playing with this idea called equation of love. I didn't know what it was. It could have been a book. It could have been a poem. I did not know yet. So when we met up the next time, we started talking about it, and then we realized it could be a song. And so we, just started to put more energy into it. I gave Coco the idea of how I wanted the song structured. I wanted it to build up to this idea of equation of love. And he selected the beat. He wrote the song. And when I heard it, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And so I never knew I was going to make a music video, but then I got a crew together. I got a cameraman, we had a production team, and literally put this entire clip together within the space of a month. And that whole music video came about, Equation of Love. And quite an incredible experience. I could never have imagined getting so many incredible people involved in a project in such a short space of time. But I guess that's how all these magical things happen.
Yeah. Yes, I'm guessing people wanted to get involved because it felt good. There was something about it that pulled them to it. Was that on your list of intentions at the beginning of the year, or when you got together with your pals? I want to be a musician.
I don't think music is one of my strong points. The song was sung by Coco. What I did was directed, produced, and created the storyline. And so, got featured in the video as well. But I did the creative side of it.
Wow. That sounds like you're living your life really well and really beautifully, on purpose with, what your spirit's asking, what your soul is crying out for. This is really fascinating because I don't think I've ever heard anyone that has really sort of dived into science talk so beautifully about what's inside, and their intention. I think that's really magical. So how have your personal and scientific discoveries changed you? Because obviously you've been on this journey kind of bridging both, the scientific and the spiritual. How has that birthed your current reality and practice?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. And to be honest, I don't align myself with either. For a large part, I see so many shortcomings in the scientific field, and I see so many traps in the spiritual field. And so if you get caught up with either, you do get very, I guess, opinionated with, your particular field. And because I try to be free of those, it allows me to be a scientist, but also be so collaborative on all these insane projects, which as a scientist, if I was, trying to be that scientist, I would not have come across all these opportunities. So in a way, I use the tools of science, which is critical thinking, the ability to investigate, the ability to dissect down ideas, get very refined and reconstruct it in a sensible way. So those are the tools that I've learned from science, and I've been very privileged to have all the, I guess, resources available to me as well, including, mind-wear devices, access to, my own physiology. I use this Aura ring, which, detects all the, like my internal state, my heart rate variability, and I have the know-how of working with that data. So those are all valuable skills that I've gained from science. And then with spirituality, I guess I don't really align myself with all the trends that are happening. That
Yes.
has no relevance to me. I'm not interested in any of that. For me, I guess when I talk about spirituality, I do really talk about the heart. And when I say there's a difference between what the mind wants and what the heart can create, this really comes down to there's only one thing that I ever listen to, and that is my own heart. And that sort of negates all the other information that is out there. Could be truth, could be false, it doesn't even matter. Like the only information that is relevant and the only decision I ever have to make is what my heart decides in this moment. And that's what I've always gone by. So in any given moment, I could not be more aligned.
Wow. And there's the person that you needed to find when you're a teenager. So, at the start when I was asking how you were led on your journey, and you said, well, I had all these questions and I was looking around for some adult or some teacher or guide or somebody who could help answer those questions. And you are the elder that you maybe needed back then. And you're gifting yourself in the world. I think the world actually needs more people who can carry such a heart of possibility, be open to considering things and to, share their thoughts with inquiring minds. I think it's great to have people like you on the planet. Now, you've also, you're an inventor, aren't you? So you've created the Precognition Method. I'd like to know how it evolved and how it can help people practically.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Precognition Method is basically an elegant model which I use to help people understand why you should listen to your heart. And for many, they have come across listening to your heart, but it hasn't really clicked because it hasn't really been translated in a way that they understand. And so, there's things like, the 5 love languages, which you can read.
Yes.
It might make sense. And, there's so many tools out there, but I wanted to come up with my own set of, processes to then translate what love is. And my processes are biologically oriented, similar to my science background. And so I wanted to talk about love and not only just talk about it, but give people a language to talk about it. And a lot of this language is non-cognitive. It is body-based. So you don't even need, language to understand it. So I teach it predominantly viscerally. And once that is unlocked hormonally, neurochemically, then it's the feeling, the state that informs the person, because now they know what it feels like. And so that's majority of what the model covers. So first of all, we go through brain, body, and behavior. We talk about how fear and the rhythms of the heart influence that. And we go quite deep. When I talk about the brain, I can go into extended lengths about this. And when I talk about the body as well, I've spent a lot of time dedicated to understanding the body. So, I'm 37 right now, and I could not be in better physical shape, because I've did so much into understanding how the body works. And then behavior as well. So over time, understanding psychology, organizational psychology. I do a lot of corporate work, and I understand behavior change and how that affects culture change. And so all this wealth of experience I've combined together into just understanding brain, body, and behavior. And then we, transcend that, and we talk about the physiology of the body when it is unlocked in its potential. And so I talk about courage, which is quite base related. We talk about, oh, this person has a lot of guts, and courage, that instinct, that ability to just take action, all of that is related to that root driving force. I talk about compassion of the heart. And there's a lot of intelligence that unfolds when you're coming from the intelligence of the heart. So you may look at a problem at a certain level, and at the level of the mind, if it's self-centric, it might look at the problem. If you're using a strategic method, that's a different level at looking at a problem. You can also take a more moral approach at looking at a problem. But compassion is, like I talk about love as the highest state of intelligence. And there's so many elements that come into that. So I do talk about love as intelligence as well, and compassion is a very powerful way of demonstrating that. And then I talk about creativity as well, which is unlocking the potential of the mind. And there is a biological process that unites it all, and that is known scientifically as vagal tone, which is the strength of communication between brain and body. And for the most part, society functions from the mind, and they lose connection with the body altogether. And so they have very low vagal tone. But when you heighten the vagal tone and the connection is reestablished, then the gut instincts, the intuition of the heart, the creativity of the mind are all working synergistically, and that's a particular state. And so we dive deep into that. And then once we've, I guess, calibrated the internal processes, we've got your heart to work in its natural rhythm, then we apply that into how to translate that externally, how to ask for what you want, how to take action, how to find alignment, how to create a situation that could have, gone sideways, and use compassion to create alchemy. So a lot of these things start to shift, because you can't just work on the internal processes. That's only half the journey. You have to translate it externally as well. So it's a very well-mapped program, and I deliver this to corporations as well as individuals.
I like your approach in taking something that is internal, but also finding a way to apply it to make sure that it lands somehow. I see lots of different methods that don't get practiced or tested or understood in a few different ways. For instance, like, I've got 3 small children, and I can tell them to do something or teach them to do something, but it's not until they also have heard me say it, have heard themselves say it, until they've taught it to each other, until they're doing it, that it really lands. And so it sounds like your precognition method actually gets integrated fully. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. It's a very, I guess, slow release process, because I don't want, there's so much information. If you provide information, it's just information dump. People get overwhelmed, and that creates inaction. So when you deliver it in small doses, it has a different effect, and they gradually have experience with the information. And by the end of the program, they just get it.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned overwhelm there as well. There's not much you can really do with somebody when they're in a place of overwhelm. It's almost like their brain, or their ability to listen and take things in, shuts down. It's interesting that you talk about. I'm fascinated by the states that we're in. So sorry. So how did your how has your precognition method changed your life then? I can hear it's changing other people's lives from your approach. How's it changed yours?
Yeah, I guess it's given me a tool to express the information without overwhelming people. And I guess I've always been looking for the most efficient, the fastest, the simplest approaches. And when people do run through the program, they realize, wow, like, you don't need any of this complexity. You don't need complex dogma or concepts or ideologies. It's actually very simple. Simply listen to your heart. But to get someone to that stage is quite difficult. So someone might have been hurt, or someone might have checked out of their body altogether because of some form of abuse. And so to get them to trust their heart again is quite an undertaking. And so basically the program helps them build trust over time. And once they start trusting their heart, then to listen to the heart comes much more easily. So that to me is very rewarding. When I see someone blossom and open up and actually start doing what they were meant to be doing, that's quite fulfilling. And because I teach my methodology, that in itself is quite rewarding. I could not be more aligned with what I do, because who I am, what I teach, and what I want is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sort of considering the possibilities of how that could be used. Hence why I'm suddenly kind of off in my own world, kind of imagining. If we were to get creative here, how different do you think the planet would be if your precognition method was taught and integrated and understood by every child on this planet right now?
Yeah, that's something I've thought about a lot. In my book, actually, I do write that the evolution of humankind has been hijacked by the human mind.
Yes.
By the time our children leave school, they have been disconnected from their bodies and become chronic thinkers. And so this, message is reconnecting individuals, whether adults or children, back with their own body, back with their own hearts. And so that, they talk about the source of diseases is dis-ease with their own body. So if we are, uncomfortable with the only place that keeps us safe and secure, then there's a problem. And so autoimmune conditions happen, digestive problems happen, all sorts of metabolic conditions happen. It's as if the body is attacking itself. And it's so apparent with this, when this connection between brain and body is low, then diseases happen, both mental, physical, and physiological. And clinically, we actually treat things like depression, chronic fatigue syndrome,
I've had
through heightening the vagal tone. Even something like rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition, can be treated with heightening the vagal tone. So by simply heightening the vagal tone, if you can alleviate so many diseases, then the ability of any human being to use their capacity, their resources, unfolds so much more naturally, because they're not burdened by sickness or disease. So that's a huge goal of mine, and I'd be happy to share this, on a biggest, whether it be the UN or different government departments, which I've already spoken with government. but yeah, I do want this message because it's so simple to land anywhere, whether it be schools, governments, organizations.
Or even mum groups.
Yeah.
They would really listen to you. That really hit home, actually, because when I was 16, I was diagnosed with glandular fever, which led into chronic fatigue syndrome, and I spent the good part of a decade, maybe a little bit over that, just cycling around and around and around with infections, then antibiotics, then not soon after, even more infections, and then obviously depression as well, because I was in my 20s feeling very incapacitated, and it actually the thing that really changed for me was just coming back into myself. I changed my diet and did all sorts of other things, but really learning to reconnect to my instincts was one of the biggest factors in me recovering. And I just haven't been ill for a really, really long time now. But it's really disturbing to hear that so many young people do suffer from dis-ease, and that discomfort in their body, and their discomfort about who they are. And it is almost like, when I walk around town, if I go out at the moment, when I see people, they're almost like heads on sticks. You can almost see that people are just in their head state, in their mind, and just not really connected to their bodies at all. Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that would be really worthwhile to get that out to the rest of the world. So back to science now. And more sort of presenting. We've got the 2021 Higher Self Expo coming up in July this year, on the 17th and 18th of July. I think there's 33 speakers, and you're one of them. Can you tell me what you're going to be presenting to us all?
Yeah, so the in the Higher Self Expo, I'd be talking about connecting with the heart. And there's so many facets that we can go in there, but specifically I mentioned giving love a language.
Right.
That's something that I think people can take away quite meaningfully. And when I talk about the love language that comes from the Precognition Method, it's not an interpersonal love. It is self-love that I'm talking about specifically. So all the romantic fantasies that someone might have, and talk about love as a love language, I don't talk about that. I talk about it in the sense of how it's affecting our biology, what happens when oxytocin is enriched in our biology, how to do that, and what sort of behaviors occur from that. So that's what we'll explore. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about it. Wow. Oh, I could just keep on asking you questions because this is such a fascinating subject. But I fear we might need to draw this to a close. If someone's been listening to this conversation today and are thinking, right, I'm really ready, I want to work with Kaushik, what's the best way for them to engage with you and to get that process started?
Yeah, so the first point of call is my website, and it's drkaushikram.com. So even if you just Google my name, Kaushik Ram, like a lot of information would come up. You just go through my website, and there's already programs on there which you can apply straight away. So I've got online courses. Another thing that you can use straight away is my book, Hidden World. And if you want to work with me directly, there's an application process that you can fill out, and that helps me see whether if it's the right fit and I can help you. And and then if all of that aligns, then you can work with me individually. You can also work with me as an organization. So if you're a business owner and you want, I guess, more ways of engaging your employees, which is getting harder and harder now with working remotely, and a lot of employees are losing interest in the traditional way of working, especially young individuals, and they're more impact driven than the traditional just make money and pay the bill.
Yeah.
So in those cases, you can't motivate your staff just by flashing out a pay rise, which used to work in the past, but not so much anymore. So if you genuinely want to connect with your staff and raise your productivity, there's also a separate application form there for corporations as well. So those are the avenues that I focus on. And there is a lot of information on my website as well. So you can go through the blogs and, I guess you'll have to construct the information yourself. If you want hands-on and work directly with me, that option is also available to you.
Fantastic. If there was one thing you'd like people to take from this, like one piece of advice or, I don't know, one intention for the audience, what would it be?
I'd say breathe. So simple. You can't sort of not breathe. But and I'm not even talking about taking conscious breaths, but simply to realize the fact that anything that happens around you changes your breathing. And breathing is so intimately linked with your heart rate. So if something happens around you, it changes your heart rate, that immediately shifts your perception. So now you perceive the world depending on whether your heart rate has accelerated or whether it decelerates in the process as well. So I can show you measurements of my own heart rate. I'm consistently around 50 beats per minute normally. And even under threat, my heart rate still decelerates rather than the traditional heightened state of flight or fight response. So even under threat, I'm able to see all the options, consider everything clearly, and have all the time in the world to make a decision from my heart rather than panic and, make decisions of hesitation or manipulation, or when I'm simply not in my power. So simply by breathing, you're able to slow down your heart rate, heighten that vagal tone, and that's pretty much all you really need to into your heart. So that's basically the simple method. And if you really want to know how to do that, then I've got online courses teaching how to do that precisely.
Fantastic. That is excellent. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. And thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Oh my goodness. What a fantastic interview and chat. I really loved speaking to Kaushik there. What I'm really going to take from this is the importance of feeling connected with our heart and the abilities that we can tap into in ourselves, so that when we're in the right heart state and when we're feeling really relaxed, that all of a sudden we have a whole range of extra options ahead of us, that we don't have to just stick to the two that come up in our fight or flight kind of scenarios, but we are really wholesome and able to accept so much more of the world into our life and the possibilities, and think from a much more resourced place. So I've really enjoyed this. I hope you have too. If you've enjoyed the Feel Good conversation today, then please do subscribe. Please put your comments below and really feel free to share. And may I also suggest that you hook up with Dr. Kaushik Ram. So please do also go to his YouTube channel and subscribe to it so you can stay up to date with all of his news and developments. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Thank you once again for your time. Lots and lots of love to you from Portugal. Portugal to wherever you are in the world. Over and out. If you've enjoyed this conversation, then why not support today's guest at the Higher Self Expo in July 2021? The Higher Self Expo is a worldwide 24-hour event with 33 guest speakers who are all sharing their wisdom and exploring the connection between science and spirituality. To register your place and find out more, go to www.higherselfexpo.com.